My granddaughter is terrified of her mother, but she will not tell me why. Last night, she slipped me a note that said, "Grandpa, look under the boat in the garage. You will know the whole truth." So I went to check and I screamed when I saw what was hidden there. I am Jeremiah Cross, and at 69 years old, I have learned that the most dangerous things in this world often have the prettiest packaging. To my neighbors and even my own son, I am just a retired man with grease under his fingernails who fixes lawnmowers to pass the time. They see an old black man in coveralls moving a bit slower than he used to. They do not know about the chemical engineering patents I hold or the millions sitting in my accounts. I kept that hidden to teach my son the value of hard work, but tonight I realized my silence might have cost me everything. Before I tell you what I found under that boat, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The nightmare began at dinner. The air in my son Terrence's dining room was so thick with tension you could almost taste it, metallic and bitter. We were sitting at the long mahogany table Rebecca insisted on buying, even though Terrence looked like he was about to pass out just from sitting upright. My son, once a track star who could run a mile in under 5 minutes, now looked like a ghost. His skin was gray, his hands trembled as he held his fork, and his eyes were glassy. Rebecca sat at the head of the table, radiating that cold, perfect elegance she wore like armor. She was 35, white, and worked as a high-end real estate broker. She always made sure to remind me that she brought class to the Cross family name. My 9-year-old granddaughter Zola was sitting across from me. She was staring at her plate, her small shoulders hunched up toward her ears. She looked like a small animal waiting for a predator to strike. "Can you pass the water?" Zola, Rebecca said. Her voice was soft, melodic, and completely devoid of warmth. Zola jumped. Her hand jerked and the crystal pitcher tipped. Water flooded across the expensive tablecloth, soaking into the fabric and dripping onto the floor. Zola froze. She did not breathe. She did not move. She just stared at the spreading puddle with eyes wide with terror. I reached for a napkin to help, but Rebecca held up a hand. Her manicured nails were painted a sharp blood red. "Leave it, Jeremiah," she said, not looking at me. "Zola needs to learn." Rebecca stood up slowly. She walked around the table, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She stopped behind Zola. She did not yell. She did not raise her voice. She simply placed her hands on Zola's small shoulders. I watched my fork, hovering halfway to my mouth. Rebecca leaned down and whispered something I could not hear, but I saw her thumbs dig into Zola's trapezius muscles. She squeezed. I saw Zola's face contort in silent agony. The little girl bit her lips so hard it turned white, tears welling in her eyes, but she did not make a sound. She knew better than to make a sound. "That is enough, Rebecca," I said, my voice low. It was just water. Rebecca looked up at me, her smile tight. "Bestie, do not undermine me in front of my daughter. I am teaching her the composure required of the upper class, something you might not understand given your background." She released Zola, who slumped forward, gasping for air as if she had been underwater. I looked at Terrence. "Son, are you seeing this?" Terrence blinked slowly, as if his brain was processing the world through a thick fog. He rubbed his temples. "Dad, please. Rebecca is just trying to raise her right. Don't start drama. My head is splitting." He looked so weak. This was not the boy I raised. This was a shell. Rebecca returned to her seat, smoothing her skirt. "Terrence works too hard to support this family, Jeremiah. He does not need you adding to his stress. Perhaps if you contributed more than just grease stains on the driveway, you would have a say." I gripped my knife until my knuckles hurt. I wanted to tell her that I could buy this house 10 times over. I wanted to tell her that I was not just a mechanic, but I held my tongue. I needed to know what was happening in this house before I played my cards. Dinner ended in silence. Zola cleared the table, her movements robotic. When she came to take my plate, she paused. For a second, her eyes met mine. They were pleading, screaming for help. She leaned in to pretend to give me a hug goodnight, her small arms wrapped around my neck, trembling. "Good night, Grandpa," she whispered. And then I felt it, a small crumpled piece of paper being shoved into the front pocket of my flannel shirt. She pulled away quickly, terrified that her mother had seen. Rebecca was busy pouring herself a glass of wine, her back turned. Zola ran upstairs without another word. I waited until I was alone in the guest room downstairs. My hands were shaking as I pulled the paper out. It was torn from a school notebook. The handwriting was hurried, the letters jagged. "Grandpa, look under the boat in the garage. You will know the whole truth. Please hurry." My heart hammered against my ribs. A boat Rebecca had bought a small luxury canoe months ago, claiming she wanted to get into rowing for fitness. It sat on a trailer in the garage, untouched, covered by a tarp. I waited. The hours ticked by agonizingly slow. I heard Terrence coughing upstairs, a wet, rattling cough that sounded like fluid in his lungs. I heard Rebecca moving around the sound of the television, and finally silence. At 2 a.m, the house was dark. I moved. I did not turn on the hallway lights. I knew this house. I paid for the down payment on this house, though Terrence thought the money came from a bank loan I co-signed. I moved like a shadow, stepping over the creaky floorboard on the stairs, navigating the kitchen by the light of the street lamps filtering through the blinds. I opened the door to the garage. The smell of gasoline and cold concrete hit me. The garage was large, filled with Terrence's tools that he never used, and boxes of Rebecca's impulse purchases. And there it was, the boat. A sleek, white fiberglass canoe sitting on a trailer in the corner. I pulled a small flashlight from my pocket and clicked it on, keeping the beam low. I approached the trailer. It looked normal, just a standard aluminum trailer, but Zola had been specific. I got down on my knees, my old joints popping in the silence. I slid under the trailer, lying on my back on the cold concrete. I shined the light up at the underside of the boat and the frame of the trailer. At first I saw nothing, just metal beams and the hull of the boat. But then my eyes caught it. I spent 40 years as an engineer. I know metal, I know welding. There was a section of the trailer frame, a rectangular box steel beam that looked different. The welding bead was newer than the rest. It was cleaner, but the paint was a slightly different shade of black, a matte finish instead of the glossy finish on the rest of the trailer. It was a modification. Someone had cut into the frame and welded it back shut. I ran my fingers over the metal. There was a small latch hidden expertly in the shadow of the axle. It was magnetic. I pulled a flathead screwdriver from my pocket. I jammed it into the seam and pried. With a groan of metal, a panel dropped down. It was a hidden compartment, hollowed out inside the trailer's frame. My breath caught in my throat. Inside the compartment was a waterproof Pelican case, black and heavy. I pulled it out, my hands slick with sweat. I sat up, leaning against the tire of Terrence's car, and unlatched the case. I opened it. The first thing I saw were passports, 5 of them. I picked up the first one. It was a United States passport. The photo was Rebecca, but the name said Sarah Jenkins. I picked up the second. Rebecca's face again. The name was Emily Thorne. The third, Vanessa Black. 5 passports, 5 different names, all my daughter-in-law. My blood ran cold. Who was this woman sleeping upstairs next to my son? But that was not all. Beneath the passports, nestled in foam padding, was a glass vial. It was heavy industrial-grade glass. Inside was a pale greenish-blue liquid. It had no label. I uncorked it carefully. I brought it near my nose, but did not inhale deeply. I wafted the scent toward me. It was odorless to the untrained nose. But I am a chemical engineer. I spent decades working with coolants and industrial solvents. Beneath the neutrality, I caught the faint, sweet scent. It was ethylene glycol, pure concentrated antifreeze, but it had been modified. The bittering agent that manufacturers add to prevent accidental ingestion had been chemically removed. I looked at the vial, and then I thought of Terrence. I thought of his gray skin, his tremors, his confusion, the fluid rattling in his lungs. The doctors kept saying it was a mysterious autoimmune condition. They were wrong. She was poisoning him. She was killing my son, drop by drop, day by day. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The woman upstairs, the one who squeezed my granddaughter's shoulders until she cried, was a monster. She had fake identities ready to go. She had the weapon. And she was murdering my only child. A scream tore from my throat before I could stop it. It was a raw, primal sound of horror and rage that echoed off the concrete walls of the garage. No! I clapped my hand over my mouth, but it was too late. The scream had already shattered the silence of the house. I heard thumping upstairs. Footsteps, fast and heavy. She was coming. I looked at the box. I looked at the vial. I had seconds. I scrambled up, shoving the passports and the box behind a stack of old winter tires in the corner, deep in the shadows where no one would look. But I kept the vial. I shoved the small glass bottle of poison into my deep coverall pocket. The door to the garage flew open. Light flooded the room, blinding me. Dad Terrence's voice was weak, panicked, And then Rebecca's voice sharp as a knife. "What are you doing down here?" I squinted against the light. Rebecca stood at the top of the stairs in a silk robe, her hand on the light switch. Terrence was behind her, leaning on the doorframe for support, looking like he might collapse. Rebecca's eyes were not sleepy. They were wide, alert, and dangerous. She scanned the garage. Her eyes darted to the boat. I saw her posture stiffen. She saw the tool in my hand. She saw the dirt on my back. She knew I had been under the trailer. I stood there playing the part of the confused old man. But my hand was gripping the vial in my pocket so hard I thought the glass might shatter. I heard a noise. I stammered, making my voice shake more than it already was. I thought it was a rat. I was looking for a trap. Rebecca walked down the stairs slowly like a predator stalking prey. She ignored Terrence. She walked right up to me, invading my personal space. She smelled of expensive lotion and something metallic. "A rat," she repeated. Her eyes drilled into mine. She looked at the boat. She looked at the screwdriver on the floor. She leaned in close so only I could hear. "Did you find the rat, Jeremiah? Or did the rat find you?" I looked at my son swaying on the stairs, dying on his feet because of this woman. "I did not find it yet," I said, matching her gaze. "But I know it is here, and I am going to catch it." Rebecca smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I have ever seen. "Go to bed, old man," she hissed, "before you hurt yourself in the dark." I walked past her, my heart pounding a rhythm of war. I had the poison, I had the truth, but I knew that tonight the real battle had just begun, and I was terrified that I was already too late. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as the heavy footsteps pounded down the stairs. I had seconds, maybe less. The waterproof case with the passports and the diary felt like a block of ice in my hands. I could not let her see this. If Rebecca found me with her stash of fake identities, the game would be over before it even started. She would know that I knew who she really was. I threw myself toward the corner of the garage where a stack of old winter tires leaned against the wall. My knees cracked against the concrete floor, sending a jolt of pain up my legs, but I ignored it. I shoved the heavy black case deep behind the rubber stack, pushing it into the shadows and covering it with a greasy tarp. I barely had time to wipe the dust from my hands on my coveralls before the door swung open. Light flooded the garage, blinding me for a moment. Rebecca stood there silhouetted in the doorway. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than my first car, but her posture was not that of a sleepy housewife. She stood like a soldier on alert. Her eyes scanned the room with the precision of a predator. She was looking for something specific. She was looking for a mistake. "What are you doing, Jeremiah?" she demanded. Her voice was ice cold. It did not sound like a question. It sounded like an accusation. I stayed on the floor, deliberately making my movements slow and clumsy. I rubbed my knee and let out a groan of pain, channeling every bit of the old, confused man she thought I was. I heard a noise. I stammered, keeping my head low. I thought it was a rat. A big one. I was trying to find a trap, but I tripped. Rebecca walked down the stairs. She did not rush. Every step was calculated. She stopped right in front of me, looming over my kneeling form. I could smell her perfume, a cloying floral scent that barely masked the metallic smell of something else, something chemical. "A rat," she repeated. Her eyes drilled into me. She looked at the boat on the trailer. She looked at the tools scattered on the workbench. Then she looked at the tires in the corner. My heart stopped. "Yes, a rat," I said, forcing my voice to tremble. I did not want it chewing the wires on Terrence's car. You know how expensive repairs are. She stared at me for a long moment. I could see the gears turning in her head. She was calculating. Did the old fool see anything? Is he just senile, or is he lying? "You should be in bed," she said finally, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Wandering around at 2 a.m. makes people think you are losing your mind, Jeremiah, and we would not want people to think you are a danger to yourself, would we?" The threat was clear. She was already setting the stage to have me committed. She turned her gaze back to the boat trailer. I held my breath. The panel was closed, but the scratch marks from my screwdriver were fresh. If she looked closely, she would see them. Just as she took a step toward the boat, the door at the top of the stairs creaked open again. "Dad." It was Terrence. My son's voice was so weak it broke my heart. I looked up and saw him leaning against the doorframe. He looked like a corpse that had forgotten to lie down. His skin was the color of old ash. Sweat beaded on his forehead even though the house was cool. His hands gripping the doorframe for support were trembling violently. I forgot about Rebecca. I forgot about the poison in my pocket. I scrambled to my feet, my joints protesting, and rushed to the bottom of the stairs. "Son," I said, reaching out to him, "you look terrible. Come down. Let me help you sit." Terrence took a step and stumbled. I caught him. He felt frail in my arms. This was the boy who used to bench press 300 pounds. Now he felt like a bundle of dry sticks. His breathing was shallow and rattled in his chest. "I am okay, Dad," he wheezed, but his eyes were unfocused. I just heard yelling. "What is going on?" Rebecca was there in an instant. She pushed past me effectively, shoving me aside, and wrapped her arm around Terrence's waist. She looked at me with a mixture of triumph and disdain. "Your father was chasing imaginary rats, Terrence," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "He woke up the whole house." She turned her face to Terrence, smoothing his hair back from his clammy forehead. "Look at you, baby," she cooed. "You are exhausted. You work so hard for us, and you cannot even get a good night's sleep because of this nonsense." She was twisting the knife. She was using his illness, the very illness she was causing, to turn him against me. Terrence looked at me. His eyes were glassy and confused. The poison was affecting his mind, making him pliable. "Dad," he said, and there was irritation in his voice. "Why are you down here? You know I have a big presentation tomorrow. I need to sleep." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and tell him that the woman holding him was killing him. But I knew I could not. Not yet. If I accused her now without proof, she would convince him I was crazy. She would have me thrown out or worse, locked up, and he would be left alone with her and that bottle of poison. "I am sorry, son," I said, lowering my head. "I just wanted to help." "You are not helping, Jeremiah," Rebecca snapped. "You are making him worse. Look at him. He is shaking." She turned Terrence around, guiding him back toward the hallway. "Come on, baby," she said soothingly. "Let's get you back to bed. I will mix you a special tonic to help you sleep. You need your rest. A special tonic." The words made my blood run cold. She was going to dose him again, right now, and there was nothing I could do to stop it without revealing my hand. I watched them walk away. Terrence leaned heavily on her, entirely dependent on his executioner. Before she closed the door, Rebecca looked back at me. Her eyes were dead. There was no emotion, no fear, just a cold, reptilian warning. "Go to sleep, old man," she mouthed. The door clicked shut and I was left alone in the dark garage. The silence was deafening. I stood there for a long time, my fists clenched at my sides. I felt a rage so hot it almost blinded me. But I forced it down. Rage would make me careless. Rage would get my son killed. I needed to be cold. I needed to be calculating. I needed to be the engineer I used to be. I went back to my room in the basement. It was a small, unfinished space they had given me, filled with boxes and my old books. I locked the door even though the lock was flimsy. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed and pulled the glass vial from my pocket. I switched on my desk lamp and held the bottle up to the light. The liquid inside was a pale, innocent green. It looked like a sports drink or a lime soda. It swirled sluggishly, slightly more viscous than water. I uncorked it again. This time I was in the safety of my room. I could analyze it properly. I took a small drop on the tip of my finger. I did not taste it. I knew better. I rubbed it against my thumb. It was oily, smooth. I brought it to my nose and inhaled sharply. The smell was faint, masked by chemical deodorizers, but it was there. It was a sweet, syrupy scent. It smelled like candy and death, ethylene glycol, antifreeze. But this was not the stuff you buy at the gas station. That stuff is dyed bright neon colors and has a bittering agent added by law so that children and pets will not drink it. This liquid was pale and smelled sweet. Someone had processed this. Someone had distilled it or sourced it from an industrial supplier that did not require the safety additives. I thought about my days in the refinery. We used glycols for heat transfer systems. I knew the chemistry. When ingested, the body breaks it down into toxic acids. It attacks the central nervous system first. That explained Terrence's confusion and dizziness. Then it goes for the kidneys and the heart. The fluid in his lungs was likely pulmonary edema caused by heart failure. She was killing him systematically. She was dosing him enough to keep him weak, compliant, and dying, but not enough to kill him instantly. She wanted it to look like a natural decline, a tragic, mysterious illness. I looked at the bottle and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. This was not a crime of passion. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was science. This was a project. She was creating a widower. She was going to watch him die, collect the insurance, and play the grieving wife. I capped the bottle and hid it inside a hollowed-out book on my shelf, The Brothers Karamazov. I sat back on the bed staring at the wall. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was not just a grandfather or a mechanic anymore. I was a man with a target on his back, living in a house with a monster. But she had made a mistake. She thought she was fighting a confused old man. She did not know she was fighting Jeremiah Cross. I looked at the clock. It was 3:30 in the morning. I knew I would not sleep. I had to wait for the sun. Tomorrow, I had to get this sample to a lab. I had to prove what it was. And then I had to figure out how to save my son before the next dose stopped his heart forever. The game had changed, and I was done playing by her rules. The sun was barely up when I crept out of my basement room dressed in my old fishing vest and carrying a tackle box that contained no bait, only a glass vial of poison wrapped in a rag. I moved quietly, but the house felt awake watching me. I needed to get that sample to a lab. I needed irrefutable proof before I could make my move. I reached for the back door handle, my hand trembling slightly, not from age but from the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Going somewhere, Jeremiah. The voice stopped me cold. I turned slowly. Rebecca was leaning against the kitchen island, a mug of steaming coffee in her hand. She was fully dressed, wearing a sharp gray business suit, her hair pulled back tight. She looked impeccable, like a statue carved from ice. She did not look like a woman who had been prowling the garage at 2 in the morning. I gripped the handle of my tackle box tighter. "Just going to the lake," I said, forcing my voice to sound raspy and tired. "I need some air. The house is too stuffy." Rebecca took a sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving mine. She walked toward me, her heels clicking rhythmically on the tile. She stopped inches from me, blocking my path to the door. She smelled of mint and expensive hairspray. "It is interesting," she said softly. "You are going fishing, but you forgot your rod." I froze. I looked down. My hand was empty. In my haste to hide the vial in the box, I had grabbed the box but left the rod in the corner of my room. A bead of sweat trickled down my back. "I am just checking the water levels," I lied, my mind racing. "The fish do not bite when the water is too high. You would not understand." Rebecca smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a baring of teeth. "I understand more than you think, Jeremiah. I understand that you are up to something. I understand that you were snooping around my property last night." She took a step closer, invading my space. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Terrence is very sick this morning. He was vomiting all night. He needs quiet. He needs peace. He does not need his senile father wandering around causing trouble." The mention of Terrence's suffering made my stomach clench. She was doing this to him. She was poisoning him right upstairs, and she was standing here daring me to stop her. "I am going to the lake," I said, putting as much steel into my voice as I dared. "I will be back in a few hours." Rebecca studied my face. She looked at the tackle box. For a second, I thought she was going to demand to open it. I braced myself. If she tried to take it, I would have to push past her. I was an old man, but I still had the strength of 40 years in the refineries. Finally, she stepped aside. "Go," she said dismissively. "Get out of my sight, but do not think I am not watching you." I did not look back. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool morning air. I walked to my old Ford truck, threw the tackle box on the passenger seat, and cranked the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked up at the bedroom window. The curtains were drawn. My son was dying in there, and I was leaving him alone with his executioner. I had to be fast. I did not go to the lake. I drove 40 miles south, leaving the suburbs behind and entering the industrial district of the city. I drove past the massive chemical plants where I had spent my career, the smell of sulfur and oil nostalgic and grounding. I pulled up to a nondescript brick building with a sign that read Industrial Solutions, Inc. I buzzed the intercom at the side door. "Yeah," a voice crackled. "It is Jeremiah," I said. "I need a favor, Elias." The buzzer sounded and I walked inside. The air was cool and smelled of ozone and antiseptic. Elias was waiting for me in the main lab. He was a short, balding man with thick glasses, wearing a white lab coat stained with chemical reagents. We had worked together for 20 years. He was one of the few people who knew the man I used to be. "Jerry," Elias said, wiping his hands on a rag. "You look like hell." What brings you out of retirement? I set the tackle box on the steel table and opened it. I took out the glass vial with the pale green liquid. I need you to run this, I said. Mass spec, gas chromatography. I need to know exactly what it is, and I need to know the concentration. Elias looked at the vial, then at me. He saw the look in my eyes. He did not ask questions. He took the vial and walked over to his machines. I waited. The hum of the equipment was the only sound in the room. I paced back and forth, my hands clasped behind my back. I thought about the passports hidden in the garage. I thought about the fear in Zola's eyes. 20 minutes later, a printer whirred. Elias ripped the sheet off and studied it. He frowned. He looked at the paper, then back at the machine, then at me. This is nasty stuff, Jerry, he said, his voice low. Tell me, I said. It is ethylene glycol, Elias said. But it is not commercial grade. It is 99% pure. No additives, no dye. And someone has added a sweetening agent. Sucralose, maybe. It masks the chemical bite. I closed my eyes. It was confirmed. It was a weapon. This is a hunter's mix, Elias said. People use this to poison coyotes. Or rats. Where did you get this? I found it in my son's house, I said, my voice hollow. Elias went quiet. He took off his glasses and cleaned them on his coat. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. Jerry, he said, why are you doing this, doing what living like this? Driving that beat-up truck, wearing those greasy coveralls. I looked up your patent royalties last month. You know the new extraction method you designed in '89. It was licensed by a major firm in Texas. You have $10 million sitting in that trust fund, Jerry. You could buy the best doctors in the world. You could hire a private army. Why are you playing detective with a chemistry set? I looked at my hands. They were calloused and scarred. I wanted Terrence to be a man, I said softly. I wanted him to build his own life. I did not want him to be a rich kid who never learned to work. I thought I was teaching him value. And now Elias asked. Now I realize I taught him to be a victim, I said. I taught him to be weak. And a wolf found him. I took the report from Elias's hand. I cannot buy his health back with money, Elias. Not if I cannot prove what she is doing. If I just throw money at this, she will take it and run, or she will wait and kill him later. I need to stop her. I need to put her in a cage. Elias nodded slowly. He understood. He printed a second copy of the report and handed it to me. Keep this safe, he said. And Jerry, watch your back. Whoever mixed this knows chemistry. They are not stupid. I thanked him and walked out. I had the weapon. Now I needed the motive. The drive back to the house felt like a funeral procession. The report burned in my pocket. I had proof of attempted murder, but I knew it wasn't enough. If I went to the police now, she would claim it was for pests. She would claim I planted it. She would claim I was senile and confused. I needed more. I needed to catch her in the act. I pulled into the driveway just after noon. My stomach dropped. The garage door was wide open. I parked the truck and ran inside. The garage was a disaster zone. It looked like a tornado had touched down inside the four walls. Shelves were tipped over. Tools were scattered across the concrete floor. Boxes of holiday decorations were ripped open, tinsel and ornaments crushed underfoot. And in the corner, the stack of winter tires had been knocked over. My heart stopped. I ran to the corner. The tarp I had used to cover the waterproof case was slashed, but the space behind the tires was empty. She found it. Panic rose in my throat, hot and sour. She had the passports. She knew that I knew. The element of surprise was gone. Well, well, well. I spun around. Rebecca was standing in the doorway connecting the garage to the house. She was not wearing her business suit anymore. She was wearing jeans and a tight black t-shirt. She held a crowbar in her hand, tapping it rhythmically against her thigh. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure rage. The cool, elegant real estate broker was gone. This was the face of the woman in the passport photos. This was Vanessa. This was Sarah. "Did you have a nice fishing trip, Jeremiah?" she asked. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Did you catch anything?" I stood my ground, my hand instinctively going to the pocket where the lab report was hidden. "I see you did some redecorating," I said, nodding at the mess. "Stop the act," she hissed. She took a step toward me, raising the crowbar slightly. "I know you were down here last night. I saw the scratches on the trailer frame this morning. I know you took the box. I stared at her. She didn't have it. She had torn the garage apart, but she hadn't found it. Relief washed over me so strong I almost laughed. In my panic last night after I hid the box behind the tires, I had moved it again. Just before I ran upstairs to meet Terrence, I had kicked it under the workbench into the dark recess where the oil pans were kept. It was a split-second decision I barely remembered making until now. She tore apart the tires because she saw the tarp, but she missed the bench. I do not know what you are talking about, I said, channeling every ounce of stubborn old man I had left. I was looking for a rat. You are a liar, she spat. She swung the crowbar and smashed the headlight of Terrence's car. Glass shattered and tinkled onto the floor. I flinched, but I did not back down. Give it to me, she screamed. Give me the box, old man. I do not have your box, Rebecca, I said calmly. But I suggest you clean this up before Terrence sees it. He might think you have lost your mind. She laughed a harsh barking sound. Terrence, she mocked. Terrence sees what I tell him to see. Terrence thinks what I tell him to think. He is barely conscious, Jeremiah. He does not care about the garage. She walked right up to me. She was taller than me in her boots, and she used it. She leaned down, her face inches from mine. I could see the madness in her eyes, the desperation. You are playing a dangerous game, she whispered. You think you are protecting him? You are just speeding up the inevitable. She poked me hard in the chest with a finger. Where is it? She demanded. I looked her dead in the eye. If there was a box, I said slowly, and if I had found it, I would have given it to the police, wouldn't I? Her eyes widened slightly. Fear flickered there for a second. She stepped back, her chest heaving. She looked at the destruction around her. She realized she had lost control. You listen to me, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed violence. You are going to give me that box, and you are going to do it today, because if you do not, things are going to get very difficult for that little girl upstairs. My blood ran cold. Zola, do not threaten my granddaughter. I warned, my voice dropping an octave. It is not a threat, Jeremiah, she said, turning back to the door. It is a promise. You have until dinner. She slammed the door behind her, leaving me standing in the ruins of the garage. I looked under the workbench. In the shadows, the black case was still there. I had the leverage, but she had the hostage. I grabbed the case and ran to my truck. I could not leave it here. I hid it under the spare tire in the bed of the truck, locking the cover. It wasn't safe, but it was safer than the house. I walked back into the kitchen. I needed to see Terrence. I needed to see Zola. I needed to end this. But as I stepped into the hallway, I knew the rules had changed. We weren't playing hide and seek anymore. This was war, and the first shot had just been fired. I walked into the kitchen with the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. My hand was still inside my pocket, clutching the lab report that proved my daughter-in-law was a murderer. I found Rebecca standing by the granite island, calmly arranging flowers in a crystal vase, as if she had not just threatened my granddaughter minutes ago. The duality of her existence was terrifying. To the world, she was the picture of suburban perfection, but I had seen the darkness rotting beneath her skin. I slammed the lab report onto the counter. The sound echoed through the high ceilings of the kitchen. Stop pretending, Rebecca, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I know what you are doing. I know what you are putting in his drink. She did not even flinch. She snipped the stem of a white rose with a pair of sharp shears and placed it delicately into the water. She turned to me slowly, a look of bored amusement on her face. You are acting hysterical, Jeremiah, she said softly. It is not good for your blood pressure. I pointed a trembling finger at the paper. That is a chemical analysis, I said. It proves you are poisoning him with ethylene glycol. You are killing my son, and I am going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in a cage. Rebecca finally looked at the paper. She laughed. It was a cold, dry sound that lacked any humanity. She picked up the report with 2 fingers as if it were something dirty and dropped it into the sink. She turned on the faucet. I watched as the water turned the ink into a blurry mess, destroying the physical proof I had just driven 40 miles to get. You are a sad, confused old man, she said, leaning back against the counter. Who do you think the police will believe, Jeremiah? You look at yourself. You are a retired mechanic with grease under your nails and holes in your clothes. You are a nobody. I straightened my back. I am his father. She sneered. You are a charity case we keep in the basement. I am a respected member of this community. I am the top real estate broker in the county. I serve on the charity board. I am the devoted wife caring for her sick husband. And you. You are just the angry, senile black man who cannot accept that his son married a white woman who is out of his league." The racism was subtle, woven into her tone, but it cut deep. She was using her status, her race, and her social standing as a shield. She knew exactly how the world worked, and she was betting on the fact that the system would protect her over me. "Terrence drinks my special tonic because he trusts me," she continued, her voice dripping with venom. "He takes it because he loves me. He knows I only want to make him strong again. If you try to tell anyone otherwise, I will tell them you are suffering from dementia. I will tell them you are paranoid. I will have you locked away in a state facility so fast your head will spin." I took a step toward her, my fists clenched. "You are a monster, and you are powerless," she hissed. "Look at this house. Look at this life. I built this. I control this. You are just a guest, and guests can be removed." I was about to grab her to shake the truth out of her when I heard a crash from the hallway. The sound of shattering glass broke the tension. We both turned. Terrence was standing in the archway. He had dropped a framed picture from the wall. He was swaying on his feet, his skin a sickly shade of yellow-gray under the hallway lights. He looked like he had aged 20 years in the last week. His eyes were red and unfocused, swimming in a pool of confusion and pain. Rebecca's face transformed instantly. The cruel, arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of terrified victimhood. She let out a sob that sounded painfully real and rushed toward him. "Terrence." "Oh, thank God you are here," she cried, throwing her arms around his neck and burying her face in his chest. "I am so scared." Terrence looked down at her confused. He patted her back clumsily. "What is happening? Why is there yelling?" Rebecca looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "It is your father," she sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at me. "He has lost his mind, Terrence. He cornered me. He was screaming at me. He accused me of having an affair. He was going through my purse looking for money. I think he is dangerous." I stood there frozen in disbelief. The lie was so sudden, so vicious that I could not find my voice. "That is a lie," I roared, stepping forward. "Son, listen to me. She is poisoning you. That is why you are sick." Terrence winced at the volume of my voice. He put a hand to his head as if my words were physical blows. He looked at me, and I saw no recognition of the father who had raised him. I saw only a stranger looking at an intruder. "Dad, stop it." Terrence mumbled his words, slurring. "Why are you yelling at Rebecca? She takes care of me. She is killing you." I pleaded, desperate to break through the fog in his brain. "Look at yourself. You are dying, Terrence. It is the drink she gives you." Terrence pushed Rebecca gently aside and stumbled toward me. He swayed dangerously, grabbing a chair to steady himself. His eyes narrowed. "You are jealous," he spat. The words were weak, but they hit me harder than a fist. "You have always been jealous. You are jealous that I made something of myself. You are jealous that I have a beautiful wife and a big house. You want to ruin it. No, son, no," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "I love you. I have millions. I never told you because I wanted you to be strong." He laughed, a wheezing, painful sound. "Millions," he mocked. "You fix lawnmowers, Dad. You are losing it. Rebecca is right. You are sick in the head." He turned to Rebecca, who was cowering by the sink, pretending to be terrified. "Did he hurt you, baby?" Terrence asked. She shook her head, wiping away fake tears. "Not physically, but the things he said. He called me terrible names. He said I was a gold digger. He said I did not love you." Terrence turned back to me, his face twisted in a snarl of pure hatred. It was the poison talking. It was the toxins eating away at his brain, stripping away his logic and leaving only aggression and paranoia. But it still broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. "Get out," Terrence said. "Son, please," I begged. "Get out of my house," he screamed, his voice cracking. "I do not want you here. You are toxic. You are trying to destroy my family. Pack your things and get out before I call the police." I looked at him. My boy. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had sat up with when he had a fever. He was standing there dying on his feet, protecting the woman who was murdering him. I felt a pain in my chest that was worse than any heart attack. I had lost him. She had taken his mind before she even took his life. If I left now, he would be dead within a week. I knew it. The dosage was increasing. His kidneys were failing. If I walked out that door, I would never see him alive again. And Zola. She would be left alone with this monster. I looked at Rebecca. She was watching me over Terrence's shoulder. Her eyes were dry now. She mouthed 2 words to me. Game over. I stood in the silence of the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. My pride was screaming at me to leave, to preserve my dignity, to walk away from the son who had just disowned me. But a father's love does not have pride. A father's love is survival. I could not leave. I needed access to the house. I needed to be near Zola. I needed to find where she hid the real stash of poison so the police could find it. If I left, the game was truly over. I took a deep breath. It tasted like ash. I lowered my head. I let my shoulders slump. I made myself look small, defeated, and old. I am sorry, I whispered. What Terrence asked, blinking. I am sorry, I repeated, looking at the floor. I do not know what came over me. I have been confused lately. I forget things. I get angry for no reason. Maybe you are right. Maybe I am sick. Terrence looked at Rebecca, unsure. The anger drained out of him, leaving him exhausted. He is apologizing, Terrence said to her. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. She knew what I was doing. She knew I was playing a card. But she also knew she could not kick me out if Terrence felt sorry for me. It would break her narrative of the caring wife. She had to play along. He scared me, Terrence, she said, her voice trembling. I do not feel safe. I will stay in the basement, I said quickly. I will not come upstairs unless you invite me. I just have nowhere else to go. Please, son, do not throw me on the street. Terrence sighed, rubbing his face. He looked so tired. Fine, he said. But you stay away from Rebecca, and you see a doctor tomorrow. If this happens again, you are gone. Do you understand? I understand, I said. Thank you. Terrence leaned heavily on the table. I need to lie down, he groaned. My stomach is killing me. Rebecca rushed to him. Come on, I will help you. She guided him past me. As they passed, she paused. Terrence was too focused on putting one foot in front of the other to notice. Rebecca leaned in close to my ear. Her breath was hot on my skin. You can stay, she whispered. But if you make one wrong move, if you say one word to anyone, Zola goes to boarding school in Switzerland. I have the papers ready. You will never see her again. She will grow up thinking you abandoned her. She pulled back and smiled a sweet, sickening smile. Get some rest, Dad, she said loudly for Terrence to hear. We all want you to get better. She walked my son out of the room, leading him toward his deathbed. I stood alone in the kitchen, shaking with rage and humiliation. I had bought myself time, but the price was my dignity. I was a prisoner in my own son's house, watched by a killer who held my granddaughter hostage. I went down to the basement and sat on my cot. I pulled out my phone. I needed help. I could not do this alone anymore. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Hampton. My old friend. The private investigator who owed me a favor from back in the refinery days. I typed a message, my fingers flying across the screen. I need you. It is life or death. Meet me at the diner on 4th. Come alone. I hit send and waited. The war wasn't over. I had just gone underground. And from the darkness, I was going to bring everything into the light. I sat in a corner booth at the Greasy Spoon on 4th Street, a place that smelled of old fryer oil and burnt coffee. It was the kind of diner where nobody asked questions and everybody looked like they were running from something. I kept my hat pulled low, my eyes scanning the parking lot through the grimy window. Every passing car made my muscles tense. Rebecca was smart. She was calculating. If she knew I had left the house again, she might have followed me. I checked my watch. Hampton was late. My hand was in my pocket, clutching the flash drive containing the photos of the passports and the audio recording of Rebecca threatening Zola. This was my leverage. This was my lifeline. The bell above the door jingled. A tall man in a trench coat walked in. He looked tired, his face etched with lines that told stories of too many nights spent watching the worst of humanity. Hampton. We had worked together years ago when he was security for the refinery and I was the lead engineer. He knew I wasn't just a mechanic. He knew I was a man who solved problems. He slid into the booth opposite me without a word. He didn't order coffee. He just placed a thick manila folder on the table between us. His eyes were serious, dark pools of concern. Jerry, he said, his voice a low rumble. You have stepped into a nest of vipers. Did you run the names? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Hampton nodded. He tapped the folder. It is worse than you think, he said. Rebecca does not exist. The woman living in your house sleeping next to your son is a ghost. Her real name is Vanessa Thorne, but she has been Sarah Jenkins in Ohio and Emily Thorne in Arizona. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. And the husbands, I asked, dreading the answer. Hampton opened the folder. He pulled out 3 death certificates. 3 of them, he said, all dead within 2 years of marriage, all of them wealthy or heavily insured, and the cause of death. He pushed the papers toward me. I looked at the first one. My stomach churned. Acute renal failure. I looked at the second. Cardiac arrest due to electrolyte imbalance. The third, pulmonary edema. They are the same symptoms, I whispered. They are the same symptoms Terrence has. Hampton nodded grimly. She is a black widow, Jerry. She finds them, marries them, insures them, and then slowly poisons them. She uses antifreeze because it mimics natural organ failure. By the time anyone gets suspicious, the body is cremated and she is gone with the money. He pulled out another document. It was a copy of a life insurance policy application. She took this out on Terrence 3 months ago, Hampton said. $5 million, double indemnity for accidental death. My hands shook as I held the paper. $5 million. That was the price of my son's life. That was why she was killing him. She is escalating, Hampton warned. She usually takes 2 years. Terrence has only been married to her for 18 months. She is rushing it. Maybe she suspects you are onto her, or maybe she just got greedy. I looked at the photos of the dead men. They looked happy. They looked like Terrence. They had no idea the woman they loved was a monster. She threatened my granddaughter, I said, my voice thick with rage. She said she would send her to a boarding school in Switzerland. Hampton's eyes narrowed. That fits her pattern. She isolates the victims. She gets rid of anyone who might ask questions. Jerry, you need to get them out of there. Tonight. I can't, I said. Terrence won't leave. He thinks she is saving him. And Zola. She has papers on Zola. If I take her, she will call the cops for kidnapping. She will use her status. She will paint me as the crazy old grandfather. Hampton leaned forward. Then we need to catch her in the act. We need indisputable proof. The lab report you told me about, it is gone. The passports, she moved them. We need something that sticks. I told him about the boat, about the hidden compartment. If she moved the passport, she moved them to a go bag, Hampton said. She is getting ready to run. When Terrence dies, she will cash out and vanish. We made a plan. It was dangerous. It required me to go back into that house, back into the lion's den. But I had no choice. I left the diner feeling heavier than when I entered. I had the truth now, but the truth was a heavy burden. I drove back to the house, my eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked normal, suburban, quiet. But as I opened the front door, I smelled it. Smoke. Not the smell of food burning. It was the acrid chemical smell of melting plastic. Panic seized me. Zola. I ran into the living room. The fire in the fireplace was roaring flames licking high up the chimney. Rebecca was nowhere to be seen. But Zola was there. She was curled into a ball on the rug in front of the hearth, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Zola. I cried, rushing to her. She looked up. Her face was streaked with soot and tears. Her eyes were wide with a terror that no child should ever know. She burned her grandpa, she choked out. She burned Miss Hattie. I looked into the fire. In the center of the flames, melting into a grotesque puddle of plastic and synthetic hair, was Zola's favorite doll, the one my late wife had given her. I felt a rage so pure, so white-hot that for a moment I couldn't see. This was not just cruelty. This was psychological warfare. Rebecca was systematically breaking Zola's spirit, terrorizing her into silence. I scooped Zola up into my arms. She clung to me, burying her face in my shoulder. Why, I whispered. Why did she do this? She said I was talking too much. Zola sobbed. She said bad girls do not get to keep their toys. She said if I tell you anything else, she will burn my drawings next. I held her tight, rocking her back and forth. I looked at the dying fire, at the charred remains of the doll. This was a message. It was a message for me as much as for Zola. Rebecca knew I was investigating. She knew I was a threat, and she was showing me exactly what she was capable of. I heard a cough from upstairs. A deep, wet, rattling cough, that sounded like death itself. Terrence. I realized then that we had run out of time. Rebecca wasn't just escalating the abuse. She was accelerating the timeline. The burning of the doll, the threats, the rushing of the poison. She was done playing games. She was going to kill him. Soon. Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. I carried Zola to her room and sat with her until she fell into a fitful sleep. Then I went to my room in the basement. I took out my phone and texted Hampton one word. Now. I knew what I had to do. I had to offer myself as bait. I had to offer her something she wanted more than the insurance money. I had to use my secret fortune to lure the monster out of the shadows. And I had to do it before my son took his last breath. The endgame had begun. I spent the morning at the public library not reading books, but crafting the perfect lie. I needed bait, and I knew exactly what kind of bait a shark like Rebecca would not be able to resist. I used an old computer to forge a letter on the letterhead of the chemical company where I had spent 30 years of my life. It was a notice of a deferred executive pension payout, a lump sum of $500,000 that had supposedly been tied up in legal arbitration for a decade and was now ready for release. It was a significant amount of money to anyone, but to a woman who had just burned through her husband's savings and was desperate enough to commit murder for an insurance payout. It was a lifeline. It was immediate cash. It was freedom. I crumpled the paper slightly to make it look like it had been carried in a pocket, then smoothed it out again. I walked back into the house just before noon. The air inside was stale and heavy with the unspoken threats hanging between us. Terrence was upstairs, likely unconscious from the morning dose of poison. Rebecca was in the living room aggressively typing on her laptop, her back stiff and angry. I walked into the kitchen, making sure my footsteps were heavy enough to be heard. I poured myself a glass of water and placed the letter on the granite island right next to her car keys. I left it face up, the bold text regarding the settlement amount clearly visible. I took a sip of water, patted my pockets as if searching for something, and then muttered about leaving my glasses in the garage. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving the bait unguarded. I stood in the hallway, just out of sight, pressing my back against the wall. I held my breath. The typing in the living room stopped. I heard the soft click of her heels on the hardwood floor. She was moving toward the kitchen. I heard the rustle of paper, then silence. A long, heavy silence. I could imagine her eyes widening. I could imagine the calculations running through her mind faster than a supercomputer. $500,000. Accessible, immediate, and attached to an old man she already considered disposable. I heard the distinct click of a phone camera. She was taking a picture of the document. She was verifying it. She was probably texting her forger contact or checking the company name. I waited another 30 seconds, counting my heartbeats before I shuffled back into the kitchen. Rebecca was leaning against the counter. The letter was exactly where I had left it, but the atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. The cold, murderous tension was gone, replaced by a warmth that was even more terrifying because it was so obviously fake. "Dad," she said. The word hung in the air. She had not called me Dad since the wedding day, and even then it had felt forced. Now it dripped with syrup. "You look exhausted," she said, walking toward me. Her hips swayed. Her eyes were bright and predatory. "Why didn't you tell me you were expecting mail? I would have brought it in for you." I walked over to the counter and picked up the letter, acting flustered. "Oh, this," I stammered, folding it quickly and shoving it into my pocket. "It is nothing. Just some paperwork from the old job. Boring administrative stuff." Rebecca reached out and touched my arm. Her hand was warm, her nails digging slightly into my skin through my flannel shirt. "It does not look boring, Jeremiah," she purred. "It looks like good news. Is that a settlement check?" I pulled away gently, playing the part of the secretive, hoarding old man. "It is a pension thing," I mumbled. "They say they owe me some back pay. I do not know if it is real. I have to call them." Rebecca's eyes gleamed. "Of course it is real," she said. "You worked hard for that company. You deserve it." $500,000 is a lot of money, Jeremiah. It is life-changing money. "It is for Terrence," I said, looking at the floor. "And Zola. When I pass on." Rebecca's smile widened. It stretched her face in a way that looked painful. "That is so generous of you," she said. "But you need to be careful. Banks can be tricky with large deposits, taxes, fees. You need someone to help you manage it so you do not lose half of it to the government." She was already positioning herself. She was already reaching for my wallet. "I do not know," I said, shaking my head. "I usually handle my own money." She stepped closer. invading my personal space. "But you have been so forgetful lately, Dad," she said softly. "Remember the rat in the garage? Remember yelling at me yesterday? We are all worried about you. You do not want to make a mistake with this money. You do not want to lose Terrence's inheritance because you forgot to file a form." The threat was subtle but clear. If I didn't let her help, she would use my confusion against me. She would declare me incompetent and take it anyway. "I will think about it," I said. "Good," she said. "Now go wash up. I am going to make us a special dinner tonight, to celebrate." I walked away feeling like I needed a shower to wash off the feeling of her touch. But the trap was set. She had taken the bait. Now I just had to reel her in without getting bitten. That evening the transformation was grotesque. The house, usually silent and tense, was filled with the smells of roasting meat and herbs. Rebecca had cooked a prime rib roast, expensive wine was breathing on the table, and she had even set out the good china. She had dressed up for the occasion, wearing a low-cut dress that showed too much skin for a family dinner. She was playing every angle. She was the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect hostess. Terrence was brought downstairs. He looked worse than yesterday. His skin was translucent, his eyes sunken into dark hollows. He could barely hold his head up. Rebecca had positioned him at the table like a prop. "Look who is joining us," she announced as I walked into the dining room. She pulled out my chair for me. "Sit down, Jeremiah," she said. "I poured you a glass of wine. It is a Cabernet, very smooth." I looked at the wine. I looked at Terrence's glass, which was filled with special green juice. I knew better than to drink anything she poured. "I am on antibiotics." I lied. "Water is fine." Rebecca's smile flickered for a second, but she recovered quickly. "Of course," she said. "Health comes first." She served the food, piling my plate high with meat and potatoes. She ignored Zola, who was eating quietly in the kitchen, banished from the adult celebration. Throughout the meal, Rebecca kept steering the conversation back to the money. "You know, Jeremiah," she said, cutting Terrence's meat for him because his hands were shaking too much to hold the knife. "Terrence and I have been looking at investment opportunities. Real estate is booming right now. If you invested that capital, we could double it in a year. Imagine what that would do for Zola's future." Terrence looked up confused. "Money. What money? Dad got a settlement?" "Terrence," Rebecca explained, speaking to him like he was a child. $500,000. "Isn't that wonderful? He is going to let us help him manage it." Terrence looked at me, his eyes swimming. "That is great, Dad," he mumbled. "Rebecca is good with money. She is smart." It broke my heart to hear him praise his killer. I cleared my throat. I looked at Rebecca. I decided it was time to close the trap. "I have been thinking about what you said, Rebecca," I said slowly. "You are right. I am getting old. I forget things. I do not want to mess this up." She leaned forward, her eyes hungry. "I can have the paperwork drawn up tomorrow," she said quickly. "A power of attorney, just for the finances. It would allow me to deposit the check and set up the trust for Zola. You would not have to lift a finger." I nodded, pretending to consider it. "I will do it," I said. She let out a breath she had been holding. Her eyes lit up with triumph. But I added, raising a finger, "I have one condition." "Anything," she said. "I want to celebrate properly," I said. "Next week is Terrence's 40th birthday, and it is your anniversary. I want to have a party, a big one, just the family." Rebecca frowned. "A party? Terrence is sick, Jeremiah. He is not up for a party. He needs fresh air," I said. "I want to take the boat out, the canoe. We go out on the lake, have a toast, watch the sunset. It will be good for him. It will be a memory for Zola." She hesitated. I could see her mind working. A boat trip, on the lake, isolated, deep water. "If I sign the papers, I get the money, but you are still here," she was thinking. "But if we go on the boat, accidents happen on boats. Old men fall overboard. Sick husbands slip." I watched the idea take root in her mind. I watched her realize that I was handing her the perfect murder weapon. She could get the money and get rid of the bodies in the same afternoon. "If we do this," I continued pushing the narrative, "I will sign the papers the morning of the trip. I will give you full control, and then we can go out on the lake and celebrate our future." She looked at Terrence, who was slumped in his chair, half asleep. She looked at me, and then she smiled. It was the smile of the spider when the fly stops struggling. "That sounds beautiful, Jeremiah," she said softly. "A boat trip. Just the family. It is exactly what we need." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was soft, but her grip was iron. "I will make all the arrangements," she said. "Next Saturday, we will take the canoe out to the deep water. It will be a day we never forget." I squeezed her hand back. "I am counting on it," I said. In that moment, looking into her eyes, I saw the reflection of my own death. She was already planning how to weigh down my body. She was already writing the eulogy, but she didn't know that she wasn't planning a funeral. She was planning a raid. And the water she thought would hide her crimes was going to be the mirror that revealed them. The date was set. Now I just had to keep my son alive for 7 more days. The waiting game was killing my son faster than I had anticipated. 2 days after the dinner where I laid the trap, the sound of a heavy thud shook the ceiling above my basement room. It was followed by a wet, retching sound that made my skin crawl. I dropped the schematic I was drawing and ran up the stairs, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The noise was coming from the upstairs master bathroom. The door was locked. I pounded on it, shouting Terrence's name, but there was no answer. Only the sound of labored, gurgling breathing. I did not wait for permission. I threw my shoulder against the wood twice until the frame splintered and the door swung open. The scene inside was a nightmare painted in red and gray. Terrence was collapsed on the white tile floor, curled into a fetal position. He was convulsing violently. Dark, clotted blood was splattered across the toilet bowl and his pajama shirt. His skin was no longer just pale. It was a terrifying, waxy yellow, the color of old parchment. He was drowning in his own fluids, his kidneys shutting down his body, flooded with toxins that had nowhere to go. Rebecca was standing in the doorway of the bedroom watching him. She was not rushing to his side. She was not calling for help. She was simply observing, her arms crossed over her chest, a look of mild annoyance on her face, as if he had spilled wine on a rug instead of coughing up his lifeblood. "Help him!" I screamed, dropping to my knees beside my son. I turned him onto his side to clear his airway. His skin was burning hot, but he was shivering as if he were freezing to death. "He is just having a reaction to the medication," Rebecca said, calmly, not moving a muscle. "He needs to ride it out. It gets messy before it gets better." I checked his pulse. It was thready and racing, skipping beats in a chaotic rhythm. He was going into shock. His eyes rolled back in his head, showing only the whites. "He is dying!" I roared. I reached into my pocket for my phone to dial 911. Rebecca moved faster than I expected. She snatched the phone from my hand before I could unlock the screen. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging into my wrist. "No ambulances," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "Think about the neighbors, Jeremiah. Think about Terrence's reputation. We do not want sirens and flashing lights drawing attention." She shoved me back, putting herself between me and the door. She pulled her own phone from her pocket. "I am calling Dr. Vance," she said. "He is a private concierge doctor. He knows Terrence's history. He can be here in 20 minutes. He will give him a sedative and handle this discreetly." Dr. Vance. The name sent a jolt of terror through me. Hampton had mentioned a Dr. Vance in his report on the Black Widow's previous husbands. He wasn't a savior. He was the closer. He was the one who signed the death certificates. He was the one who administered the final lethal dose of morphine to ease the passing. If that man walked through this door, Terrence would never walk out. "Give me the phone, Rebecca," I warned, standing up slowly. She sneered at me. "Or what, old man? You are going to hit a woman. Go ahead. That will make the restraining order so much easier to get." She dialed a number, her eyes daring me to move. "Hello, doctor. It is Rebecca. Yes, it is time. He is in bad shape. We need you now." Time stopped. I looked at my son on the floor, gasping for air. I looked at the woman sentencing him to death. I realized that politeness laws and social norms did not matter anymore. The only thing that mattered was survival. I turned and ran, not toward her, but toward the master bedroom closet. "What are you doing?" she screamed. "Get out of there." I ignored her. I tore through the hanging clothes until I found the false panel in the back wall. It was where Terrence kept his old hunting gear, things he hadn't touched since he married her. My hands found the cold steel of the Remington 870 shotgun. I knew it was unloaded. I had taught Terrence gun safety myself. We never kept loaded weapons in the house. But Rebecca didn't know that. I racked the slide. The sound was unmistakable. Clack, clack. It was the universal sound of imminent violence. It was a sound that triggered a primal fear in anyone who heard it. I walked back into the bathroom, the shotgun leveled at her chest. Rebecca froze. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the tiles. Her face went white, her arrogance vanishing in a split second. "Jeremiah, are you crazy?" she whispered, backing away until she hit the sink. "Put the phone down," I said, my voice steady and cold. "We are not waiting for Dr. Vance. I am taking him to the hospital. Now." "You cannot shoot me," she stammered, holding her hands up. "You will go to jail." "I do not care about jail," I lied, stepping closer. "I care about my son. If you do not move away from the door in the next 3 seconds, I will paint this room with you. 1. She looked at my eyes. She saw the rage of a father who had been pushed too far. She saw 40 years of repressed anger. She didn't see a bluff. She saw a bullet. She scrambled sideways, tripping over her own feet to get out of the line of fire. "Take him!" she shrieked, cowering in the hallway. "Take him then. But if he dies on the way, it is your fault." I didn't waste breath answering. I slung the shotgun over my shoulder and scooped Terrence up in my arms. Adrenaline gave me the strength of a man half my age. I carried him down the stairs, ignoring the burning in my back. I kicked open the front door and ran to my truck. I threw him into the passenger seat and buckled him in. As I ran around to the driver's side, I saw Rebecca watching from the window. She was already on the phone again, probably calling Vance to call it off, or calling her forger. It didn't matter. I had him. I drove like a madman. I ran red lights. I drove on the shoulder. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other on Terrence's chest, feeling for the rise and fall of his breath. "Stay with me, son," I begged. "Do not let her win. Stay with me." We reached the county hospital in record time. I pulled up to the emergency bay, honking my horn until nurses ran out with a gurney. "Toxins," I shouted as they loaded him. "Kidney failure, possible chemical ingestion. Treat him for poisoning." They rushed him through the double doors, and I was left standing in the waiting room covered in my son's blood, holding an empty shotgun that I realized I should probably leave in the truck before I got arrested. I ran back, locked the weapon away, and returned to the waiting room, collapsing into a plastic chair. Hours passed. They felt like days. I watched the clock on the wall, the second hand, ticking away the remaining moments of my son's life. Finally, a doctor in blue scrubs came out. He looked exhausted. "Family of Terrence Cross," he called. I shot up. "That is me. I am his father." The doctor motioned me over to a quiet corner. "He is stable," the doctor said. "But it was close. His kidneys are functioning at 15%. We found high levels of oxalic acid in his urine and severe metabolic acidosis." He paused, looking at me closely. "Mr. Cross, these are classic signs of ethylene glycol poisoning. Antifreeze, we need to call the police. This does not happen by accident." I felt a wave of relief that they had found it, followed immediately by a wave of panic. If the police got involved now, Rebecca would lawyer up. She would claim I poisoned him. She would destroy the evidence in the house. She would flee with the money she had already stolen. Or worse, she would take Zola and disappear. I needed her to feel safe for just a few more days. I needed to get her on that boat. "No," I said quickly. "It is not antifreeze." The doctor frowned. "Sir, the labs are conclusive. It was food poisoning." I lied, my mind racing to construct a plausible story. "We went to a sketchy seafood buffet yesterday. He ate raw oysters. Bad ones. He has been sick ever since. He must have taken something for the pain that reacted badly. Maybe some old herbal supplements he buys online. He takes all kinds of weird stuff for his workouts." The doctor looked skeptical. "Oysters do not cause metabolic acidosis like this, and supplements do not mimic antifreeze. He buys cheap stuff from overseas," I insisted. "Who knows what is in it?" "Please, doctor, he is not suicidal and nobody is trying to kill him. It was just a stupid mistake. If you call the police, it will ruin his career. He works in finance. A scandal like this? Please, just treat him. Flush his system." The doctor sighed. He didn't believe me, but he didn't have enough to hold me on it. "We are starting dialysis," he said sternly. "We will flush the toxins. But I am noting my suspicions in the chart. If this happens again, I am calling the authorities whether you like it or not." "Thank you," I said. "Can I see him?" He nodded. "Bed 4. Keep it brief." I walked into the room. Terrence was hooked up to a dialysis machine, his blood cycling through tubes that looked too dark. He was pale and weak, but his eyes were open. "Dad," he rasped. I took his hand. It was cold. "I am here, son. I am here." "Where is Rebecca?" he asked. The first words out of his mouth were about her. "She is at home," I said gently. "She was too upset to come." Terrence closed his eyes. "She must be terrified." I feel so bad for scaring her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him. Son, I said, leaning close. You were poisoned. The doctor said it was toxins. It was the shrimp, Terrence mumbled, his voice slurring from the sedatives. Rebecca said the shrimp smelled funny last night. She told me not to eat it, but I did anyway. She tried to warn me. She always takes care of me. I stared at him in horror. She had planted the cover story in his head before I even got him out of the house. She had fed him the poison and the alibi at the same time. Even as his body was failing, his mind was still wrapped around her finger. It was just bad food, Dad, he whispered, drifting off. Do not be mean to her. She loves me. I squeezed his hand, fighting back tears of frustration. I could not save him with words. He was too far gone. The only way to break the spell was to show him the monster beneath the mask. Rest, son, I said. Get your strength back. We have a big party next week. Remember the boat trip? He smiled faintly. Yeah, the boat. That will be nice. I stayed until he fell asleep. Then I walked out of the hospital into the night air. I had bought him a few days of safety. The hospital would keep him for observation. She couldn't dose him here, but as soon as he was released, she would try again. I took out my phone. I had a text from Hampton. The boat is ready. Cameras are live. I looked back at the hospital window. Get well, son, I whispered. Because next Saturday you are going to see the devil, and I need you awake for it. I met Hampton 3 days later inside his surveillance van parked 2 blocks away from my house. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and electronics. Hampton looked grim. He did not say a word when I climbed into the passenger seat. He simply handed me a headset and pressed a button on his console. The voice that filled my ears was crystal clear. It was Rebecca. She was speaking in a tone I had never heard her use with Terrence or me. It was sharp, professional, and utterly devoid of emotion. I need the papers by Friday night, she was saying. No excuses. We are leaving Saturday morning right after the accident. There was a pause, and then a man's voice, raspy and nervous. Saturday is too soon, Vanessa. The ink on the Swiss passports needs time to cure, or it will smudge. I do not care about the ink, Rebecca snapped. Just get it done. The old man signed the power of attorney this morning. The funds are already in transit. I have $500,000 clearing in my offshore account on Monday. By then, I need to be gone. But what about the husband, the man asked. He is weak, Rebecca said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. He is barely walking. Once we get out on the water, it will be easy. A toast to celebrate, a little sedative in the champagne, and then... splash. 2 tragic drownings, a grieving widow and a traumatized daughter left behind. I have already drafted the press statement. My hands clenched into fists so tight my knuckles turned white. Hearing it was different than suspecting it. Hearing her discuss the murder of my son and me as if it were a business transaction, a logistical hurdle to be cleared, made me feel a coldness in my marrow that I knew would never go away. And the girl, the man asked. Zola is my ticket, Rebecca replied. She is the sympathy card. No one investigates the single mother trying to protect her child. Once we are in Zurich, I will put her in that boarding school we discussed. I will visit her once a year. That is enough. The recording ended with a click. I took off the headset and looked at Hampton. She is not just killing you, Jerry Hampton said softly. She is erasing you. She is going to liquidate everything, dump your bodies in the lake, and disappear into a new life with your granddaughter as a prop. Saturday, I whispered. That is 2 days from now, Hampton said. We have enough to arrest her for conspiracy right now. We can pick her up tonight. I shook my head. If we arrest her now, she lawyers up. She claims it was just talk. She claims she was under duress. And the money? She has already moved some of it. If she goes to prison without revealing where she stashed it, Terrence is left with nothing. He is sick, Hampton. He needs that money for treatment, and he needs to see it. He needs to see her try to kill us. If the police just drag her away, he will spend the rest of his life thinking I framed his wife. He will hate me. I need him to see the monster. Hampton sighed, rubbing his face. You are playing with fire, Jerry. If you get on that boat, you are putting yourself in the kill zone. If anything goes wrong... I know, I said. That is why I need to make sure nothing goes wrong. I need access to the boat. Tonight. Hampton looked at me, then reached into the back of the van. He pulled out a small black case. Here is the hardware you asked for, he said. high-definition microcameras, long-range transmitters, and the solenoid valve. Are you sure you can rig it? I looked at the equipment. I thought about the 40 years I spent building refineries, designing fail-safe systems for volatile chemicals, and solving problems that baffled younger engineers. I can rig it, I said. I am going to turn that boat into a witness stand. That night, the house was quiet. Terrence had been discharged from the hospital that afternoon, weak but stable. He was sleeping heavily in the guest room downstairs, Rebecca insisting he needed to be close to the kitchen for his recovery. In reality, I knew she just wanted him on the ground floor so she wouldn't have to carry him far on Saturday. Rebecca was out supposedly picking up party supplies but likely meeting with her forger to collect the passports. This was my window. I went into the garage. The boat sat on its trailer, gleaming white and innocent under the fluorescent lights. It was a 20-foot bow rider with a powerful outboard motor. A vessel designed for leisure, now repurposed for death. I went to work. I did not move with the speed of a young man, but with the precision of a master. I opened the engine cowling. The smell of grease and gasoline was familiar, comforting. I located the fuel line feeding the injectors. I took the solenoid valve Hampton had given me. It was a small device, barely the size of a thumb, but it was powerful. I cut the fuel line and spliced the valve in. It was a remote-controlled kill switch. With the press of a button on a key fob in my pocket, I could cut the fuel flow instantly. The engine would die, and no amount of restarting would bring it back to life until I released the valve. Next came the surveillance. I took the microcameras no larger than a pinhead. I drilled a tiny, imperceptible hole in the dashboard facing the rear seats. I installed one there. I placed another in the frame of the windshield, pointing back at the driver's seat. I hid microphones under the gunnels, taping them securely and painting over the tape to match the fiberglass. I wired everything into the boat's main battery, adding a small backup power source just in case. I tested the signal. I pulled out my phone and opened the app Hampton had installed. The video feed was crisp and clear. The audio picked up the sound of my own breathing. I closed the engine cowling and wiped away every fingerprint. I lay on the floor and checked my work from every angle. It was invisible. To the untrained eye, the boat was exactly as it had been. But now it was a trap. I stood up, my back aching, and looked at the vessel. Rebecca thought she was the captain of this voyage. She thought she was steering us toward our end. She did not know that I had just taken the helm. I left the garage and went upstairs to Zola's room. It was late, but the light under her door was still on. I knocked softly. "Come in," she whispered. I opened the door. Zola was sitting on her bed, her knees pulled up to her chest. She was not playing. She was not reading. She was just staring at the wall, her eyes red and puffy. The empty spot on her shelf where Ms. Hattie used to sit was a glaring reminder of the threat hanging over her. "Hi, sweetie," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Grandpa," she said, her voice trembling. "Mom said, she said we are going on a trip on Saturday. She said you and Daddy are coming too." I nodded. "Yes, we are going on a boat ride." "I do not want to go," she said, tears spilling over. "I am scared. She is acting weird. She is too happy." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small pink wristwatch. It looked like a cheap digital toy, something you might get in a Happy Meal. But inside I had modified it. It contained a military-grade GPS tracker and a panic button that would alert Hampton and the local police directly. "Zola, listen to me," I said, my voice serious. "I need you to be brave, braver than you have ever been." I took her small wrist and fastened the watch. "This is not just a watch," I whispered. "It is a magic watch. Do you see this button on the side?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "If you are ever scared, if you are ever alone, and you do not know where I am, or if your mother tries to take you somewhere you do not want to go, you press this button. You hold it down for 3 seconds. Can you do that?" "Yes," she whispered. "What does it do?" "It tells me exactly where you are," I said. "No matter where you are in the world, I will find you. Even if I am not there, my friends will come." I looked deep into her eyes. I needed her to understand the gravity of this without terrifying her completely. On Saturday, I said things might get scary. Your mom might yell. There might be loud noises. But I need you to know that I have a plan. I am not going to let anything happen to you or your dad. She threw her arms around my neck and hugged me so tight it hurt. "Please do not die, Grandpa," she sobbed into my shirt. "Please do not leave me with her." I held her, stroking her hair, feeling the fragility of her small life in my arms. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I am not going anywhere, Zola. I promised, though I knew it was a promise I might not be able to keep. I am made of tough stuff. We are going to fix this. We are going to get our family back. I stayed with her until she fell asleep, clutching the watch like a lifeline. When I finally left her room, the house was dark and silent. I walked down the hall to the guest room where Terrence slept. I opened the door quietly. He was breathing, but it was a shallow, raspy sound. He looked like a skeleton under the sheets. I stood over him, watching his chest rise and fall. "I am sorry, son," I whispered to the darkness. "I am sorry I have to put you through this. I am sorry I have to use you as bait, but it is the only way to cut the cancer out." I went down to my basement room, but I did not sleep. I sat in the chair staring at the screen of my phone, watching the live feed from the dark garage. The boat sat there, a silent white tomb. Tomorrow was Friday. The calm before the storm. I had to sign the papers. I had to hand over my fortune to the woman who wanted to kill me. I had to play the part of the fool one last time. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I was terrified, yes, but beneath the fear was a cold, hard anger that had solidified into a weapon. Rebecca thought she was taking 2 weak men out to sea. She didn't know she was bringing a hurricane on board. I checked the battery level on the kill switch remote one last time. 100%. "Let's go, Vanessa," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see who drowns first." The morning of our execution began with the scratch of a pen against paper. I sat at the kitchen table and signed the power of attorney documents Rebecca had placed in front of me. Her eyes followed every curve of the ink, her pupils dilated with a greed so raw it looked like hunger. I handed the papers to her. She snatched them up, checking the signature twice before sliding them into a heavy manila envelope. She sealed it with a sharp lick of her tongue, a gesture that reminded me of a snake tasting the air. "We are going to take good care of this, Jeremiah," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed excitement. "You have done the right thing for your family." I looked at her, forcing a weak, senile smile. "I just want to help," I said. "Good," she replied. "Now get in the truck. We have a boat to catch." The drive to Lake Pontchartrain was a study in psychological torture. We took my old Ford F-150 because it had the tow hitch, but Rebecca insisted on driving. She said my eyes were too bad for the highway. I sat in the back with Terrence, who was slumped against the window, his head lolling with every bump in the road. The air conditioning was blasting, but the cab felt stifling. It smelled of Terrence's sickness, a sour odor of sweat and decay mixed with the overpowering coconut scent of Rebecca's sunscreen. She was humming. She was actually humming along to the pop music blasting from the radio, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel. She looked vibrant. She wore a wide-brimmed sun hat and oversized sunglasses, looking like a movie star on vacation. I held Terrence's hand. His skin was dry and papery. He opened his eyes once, looking at me with a confusion that broke my heart. "Where are we going, Dad?" he rasped. "We are going fishing, son," I whispered. "Just like we used to." He closed his eyes again. Rebecca looked in the rearview mirror. Her eyes met mine over the rim of her sunglasses. "Isn't this nice?" she shouted over the music. "Just the three of us. No distractions. No Zola getting in the way." We had left Zola with the new babysitter an hour ago. Rebecca thought she was a neighborhood teenager she had found online. She did not know the woman was actually a retired police officer working for Hampton. Saying goodbye to Zola had been the hardest thing I had ever done. I had to hug her and promise I would come back, all while knowing there was a very real chance I would not. "Look at the water," Rebecca exclaimed as the lake came into view. "It is perfect, calm as glass." It was perfect, perfect for a disposal. The lake was vast, a gray-blue expanse that swallowed the horizon. There were no other boats near the old launch ramp she had chosen. It was isolated, desolate. She pulled the truck around, backing the trailer down the ramp with a skill that surprised me. She was efficient. She was ready. "Wake him up," she ordered, putting the truck in park. "He needs to walk to the boat. I am not carrying him." I shook Terrence's shoulder. "Son, we are here. Time to get up." He groaned, his face contorted in pain. His kidneys were screaming. Every movement was agony. I helped him out of the truck. He leaned his entire weight on me. I was 69 years old, but rage gave me the strength of a titan. I walked him down the dock, our footsteps hollow on the wood. Rebecca was already in the boat, unhooking the winch. She looked at us with impatience. Hurry up, she snapped. We are losing daylight. We got Terrence into the boat, settling him onto the rear bench seat. He slumped over immediately, his breathing shallow. I sat next to him. Rebecca took the captain's chair. She turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep, throaty growl that vibrated through the hull. She gunned the throttle and we shot away from the dock. The wind whipped her hair around her face. She was laughing. She was piloting her husband and her father-in-law to their watery graves, and she was laughing. I slipped my hand into my pocket. My fingers brushed the cold plastic of the remote control for the kill switch. I looked at the dashboard. I could see the tiny, almost invisible lens of the micro camera I had installed. It was recording. Every smile, every word. We drove for 20 minutes, heading straight out into the center of the lake. The shore became a thin line in the distance, then vanished altogether. We were alone, a tiny white speck in a world of blue. Rebecca cut the engine. The silence that followed was sudden and heavy. The boat rocked gently in the swells. Water lapped against the fiberglass hull. "Why did we stop?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to sell the fear. "We are far enough," she said. She stood up and stretched, looking around the empty horizon. She nodded to herself, satisfied. "This is a good spot," she said. "Deep, quiet." She walked to the cooler she had brought on board. She opened it and pulled out a bottle of expensive champagne and 3 plastic flutes. "It is time for a toast," she announced, "to celebrate the paperwork, to celebrate our future." She popped the cork. It flew over the side and landed in the water with a small splash. She poured the champagne into 2 of the glasses. Then she reached into her bag. She pulled out a thermos. And for Terrence, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "His special medicine. He needs his strength." She poured a thick, pale green liquid from the thermos into the 3rd cup. It was the antifreeze mixture. I recognized the color. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She topped it off with a little champagne to cut the texture. She handed a glass to me. Then she walked over to Terrence. "Here, baby," she said, lifting his head. "Drink this. It will make you feel better." Terrence opened his eyes. He looked at the cup. He looked at her. "Rebecca," he whispered, "I don't want it. It tastes bad." "Drink it," she ordered, her voice hardening. "Do not be a baby. It is for your own good." She pressed the cup to his lips. I stood up. "Don't," I said. Rebecca froze. She looked at me. "Sit down, Jeremiah," she warned. "Let him drink." I took a step toward her. The boat rocked. I said, "Do not give that to him," I repeated. My voice was no longer the voice of a frail old man. It was the voice of the foreman who had run crews of 200 roughnecks. It was steady. It was commanding. Rebecca slowly lowered the cup. She straightened up, turning to face me. She looked annoyed, but not afraid. "Not yet. You are ruining the moment," she said. "Sit down and drink your champagne. Or do you want to swim back?" I looked at the glass in my hand. Bubbles rose to the surface. "I am not drinking this, Rebecca," I said. "And neither is he." She laughed. A short, sharp bark. "You do not have a choice, old man. You drink it or I push you over. It is that simple." I poured the champagne onto the deck. The liquid splashed over her expensive boat shoes. She gasped. "You senile old fool." I dropped the plastic cup. It bounced on the floor. I looked her dead in the eye. "I am not senile," I said. "And I am not Jeremiah. Not to you." She frowned, confusion flickering across her face. "What are you talking about?" I took a step closer. The space on the boat was small. There was nowhere to run. "You have many names," I said, keeping my eyes locked on hers. "You are Rebecca here. But in Ohio, you were Sarah Jenkins. In Arizona, you were Emily Thorne." Her face went slack. The color drained from her skin instantly, leaving her looking like a wax figure. The cup in her hand trembled, sloshing the green poison over the rim. How she whispered. "And before that," I continued, relentless, "you were Vanessa. You killed 3 husbands, Vanessa. You poisoned them, just like you are poisoning my son." The mask fell. It didn't crack. It shattered. The sophisticated, arrogant woman vanished. In her place was something feral. Her lips curled back from her teeth. Her eyes went wide and black. "Who are you?" she hissed. "I am the man who found the passports under the trailer," I said. "I am the man who analyzed the poison in the lab. And I am the man who is going to watch you rot in prison." She looked at Terrence. He was staring at her clarity slowly piercing through the fog of his illness. He had heard the names. He saw the fear in her eyes. Vanessa Terrence whispered. She looked back at me. She looked at the water. She looked at the distance to the shore. She realized she was trapped. She realized the old man she had underestimated was the one holding the cards. And then she smiled. It was the smile of a cornered animal that has decided to bite. "You know," she said, her voice dropping to a calm, conversational tone. "You are smarter than I thought, Jeremiah. I give you credit. But you made one mistake." "What is that?" I asked, my hand tightening on the remote in my pocket. "You got on the boat," she said. She reached into the waistband of her shorts and pulled out a gun. It was a small silver pistol, but at this range it looked like a cannon. She leveled it at my chest. "Knowing the truth doesn't matter if you are dead," she said. She cocked the hammer. "Say goodbye, Jeremiah." The silver barrel of the pistol was steady, unmoving in the humid air. Rebecca did not shake. Her hand did not tremble. This was not the desperate act of a frightened woman. It was the calculated move of a professional executioner who had simply decided to move up the timeline. Terrence stared at the gun. He blinked, his sluggish mind struggling to process the image in front of him. The woman he had married, the woman he had defended against his own father, was pointing a lethal weapon at his chest. "Rebecca," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing? Put it down. It is dangerous." She did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on me, cold and hard as flint. "Shut up, Terrence," she said. Her voice was flat. "Bored. You were supposed to be asleep by now. You were supposed to drift off and slip under the water without a fuss. But your father had to play hero." Terrence tried to sit up, but his strength failed him. He slumped back against the vinyl seat, tears mixing with the sweat on his face. "You are going to shoot us?" he asked, the realization finally breaking through the poison fog. "You want to kill me?" Rebecca sighed, a sound of genuine irritation. "I did not want to shoot you," she said. "Bullets are messy. They leave evidence. Drowning is cleaner. Accidents happen. But now, yes, I am going to shoot you. And then I am going to shoot your father. And then I am going to claim self-defense. I will say the old man went crazy. I will say he attacked us. It is not as clean as a drowning, but it will do." Why, Terrence sobbed. "I loved you. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing." She snapped, her eyes flashing with sudden anger. "You gave me a mortgage. You gave me a boring life in the suburbs. You were an investment, Terrence. And a poor one at that. You were taking too long to die. The antifreeze was supposed to work months ago, but you have the constitution of an ox. I am tired of waiting." The cruelty of her words hit him harder than a bullet ever could. I saw the light go out in my son's eyes. The betrayal was absolute. She wasn't just killing him. She was erasing every happy memory he thought they shared. She was telling him that their entire life together was a lie, a long con played for a payout. She turned the gun slightly, aiming directly at my forehead. "Drop the remote, Jeremiah," she ordered. "I do not know what it does, but if you press a button, I will put a hole in your head before your thumb moves." I looked at her. I looked at the gun. I calculated the distance. 6 feet. Too far to lunge. But I did not need to lunge. "You are right, Vanessa," I said, using her real name again. "I am an old man. I cannot fight you." I slowly raised my hands. I opened my palms. "But you forgot one thing," I said. "What is that?" she asked, her finger tightening on the trigger. "I designed safety systems for oil rigs," I said. "We build in redundancies, we build in fail-safes, and we never ever rely on just one switch." I did not press the button in my hand. I didn't have to. The remote in my pocket was a decoy. The real trigger was voice-activated, calibrated to a specific phrase I had programmed into the system just last night, a phrase that would sound like a surrender. "I am done playing," I said clearly. The instant those words left my mouth, the boat shuddered violently. It wasn't an explosion. It was the sound of the solenoid valve slamming shut, cutting the fuel line instantly. The roar of the outboard motor choked, sputtered, and died. The silence that fell over the lake was sudden and absolute. Rebecca pulled the trigger. Click. She pulled it again. Click. She stared at the gun in horror. She racked the slide, a bullet ejecting onto the deck, and pulled the trigger again. Click. I had replaced the firing pin in Terrence's gun 3 years ago when Zola was born, just to be safe. I never told him. Rebecca had found the gun, loaded it, and thought she was a god. She did not know she was holding a paperweight. She threw the gun at me. It bounced harmlessly off my chest. She ran to the console, frantically turning the key. The engine cranked and whined, but it would not catch. There was no fuel. "What did you do?" she screamed, slamming her fists against the dashboard. "Start! Start, you piece of junk!" She shoved the throttle forward, but the boat drifted aimlessly. Then she heard it. We all heard it. A crackle of static from the hidden speakers I had installed under the gunnels, and then her own voice amplified, booming over the silent water. "He is weak. He is barely walking. Once we get out on the water, it will be easy. A toast to celebrate." A little sedative in the champagne, and then splash. 2 tragic drownings. Rebecca froze. She looked around wildly, trying to find the source of the sound. "I have already drafted the press statement," her recorded voice continued, cold and calculating. She looked at me. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a terror that finally matched the evil inside her. "You recorded me," she whispered. "Every word I said. And right now that recording is being live-streamed to a secure server. It is over, Vanessa." She let out a primal scream of rage. She abandoned the controls and lunged at Terrence. If she couldn't shoot him, she would throw him over. She grabbed his shirt, trying to drag him to the edge. I moved to stop her, but before I could take a step, the boat lurched again. This time it wasn't mechanical. It was an impact from below. The water around the boat erupted. It looked like a scene from a movie, but it was real gritty and terrifying. 4 black shapes broke the surface of the lake simultaneously. They were not monsters. They were men. Police divers. They wore full tactical scuba gear, their faces hidden behind masks, but the badges on their chests glinted in the sun. They had been waiting submerged, breathing from tanks, holding onto the hull, waiting for the signal that the boat was disabled. 2 of them vaulted over the side of the boat with a fluidity that was terrifying. Water streamed off their black wetsuits. "Police," one of them shouted, his voice booming. "Get down! Get on the deck!" Rebecca let go of Terrence. She spun around looking for an escape, but there was nowhere to go. There was only water and men with weapons. She scrambled backward, tripping over the cooler, and fell hard onto the fiberglass deck. She scrambled crab-like toward the bow, hyperventilating. "Do not touch me," she shrieked. "I am the victim. They kidnapped me." The diver didn't hesitate. He moved in, grabbing her wrist and twisting it behind her back in a practiced motion. She screamed in pain as he forced her face down onto the deck. Vanessa Thorne, the diver, said, his knee pressing into her back. "You are under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy." I watched as he pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. The click of the ratchet as they locked around her wrists was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a steel trap snapping shut on a wolf. Rebecca thrashed, spitting and cursing. She kicked at the diver, screaming profanities that would make a sailor blush. The elegant facade was gone completely. This was the raw, ugly truth of her soul exposed to the sunlight. Another diver moved to check on Terrence. "Is he okay?" the diver asked me, lifting his mask. "He needs a hospital," I said, my adrenaline finally beginning to fade, leaving my knees weak. "He has been poisoned." I looked at my son. Terrence was staring at his wife, at the woman pinned to the deck of the boat. He was crying silent tears, tracking through the grime on his face. He didn't look at me. He just watched as the woman he loved was hauled to her feet, water dripping from her hair, her eyes wild with hate. "You ruined everything," she screamed at me as the diver dragged her toward the side of the boat where a police cutter was rapidly approaching, sirens wailing in the distance. "You old fool. You should have just died." I walked over to her. I stood inches from her face. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to see the man she had dismissed as a senile mechanic. "I am not a fool, Vanessa," I said softly. "I am a father. And you forgot the first rule of chemistry." She glared at me, panting. "What is that?" she spat. "Pressure," I said. "If you apply enough pressure to a volatile system without a release valve, it does not just break, it explodes." The police boat pulled alongside. Uniformed officers jumped aboard. They took custody of Rebecca, handling her like the dangerous criminal she was. They read her rights, but she wasn't listening. She was staring at the water, realizing that her Swiss bank accounts, her fake passports, and her freedom were gone forever. I sat down next to Terrence. I put my arm around his shoulders. He leaned into me, burying his face in my chest like he did when he was a boy and had a nightmare. "I am sorry, Dad," he sobbed. "I am so sorry." I held him tight. The nightmare was over. We had survived the water. Now we just had to survive the truth. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, but underneath it all was the sharp metallic scent of fear. I stood behind the one-way mirror watching Rebecca spin her web. Even handcuffed to a steel table wearing a bright orange jumpsuit that clashed violently with her manicured nails, she was performing. She was not the monster who had tried to execute us on the lake. Now she was the terrified victim, the misunderstood wife, the martyr. "I told you he is crazy," she sobbed, her voice pitching up into a register of pure distress. She looked at Detective Johnson with wide, pleading eyes. "Jeremiah has always hated me. From the day Terrence brought me home, he looked at me like I was dirt. It is because I am white, isn't it? He is an old, bitter black man who cannot stand that his son married outside his race. He has been trying to break us up for 2 years. I clenched my fists at my sides. It was a calculated move. She knew exactly which buttons to push in today's climate. She was trying to turn a murder investigation into a civil rights issue, hoping the police would back off for fear of a lawsuit. Detective Johnson did not blink. He sat across from her, calm and immovable as a mountain. "We have a recording of you admitting to poisoning your husband, Mrs. Cross," he said flatly. She shook her head violently, tears flying. "I was under duress," she shrieked. "Did you not see him? He had a weapon. He hijacked the boat. He told me if I did not say those things, he would kill Terrence. I was trying to save my husband. I said whatever the crazy old man wanted me to hear just to keep him calm. That recording is inadmissible. It is fruit of the poisonous tree. She was good. I had to give her that. She knew legal terms. She knew how to twist reality until it looked like a pretzel. She was painting a picture where I was the villain, a senile, violent patriarch who had terrorized a young couple. He has been abusing us for months," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He controls the finances. He threatens us. He even threatened my daughter Zola. That is why I had the gun. I bought it to protect my child from him. And today he finally snapped. He tried to drown us all. I am the victim here, detective. You should be arresting him." I looked at Terrence, who was sitting in a wheelchair beside me in the observation room. He was wrapped in a hospital blanket, still hooked up to a portable IV drip. His face was gray, his eyes hollowed out. He was watching the woman he loved call his father a monster. He looked like a man whose soul had been scooped out with a spoon. "She is lying, son," I said softly. Terrence did not answer. He just stared at the glass, his breathing shallow and ragged. I could see the conflict in his eyes. Part of him still wanted to believe her. Part of him wanted to believe that the last 2 years of his life had not been a lie. I tapped on the glass. Detective Johnson looked up and nodded. It was time. I walked out of the observation room and into the hallway. I was carrying the waterproof Pelican case I had retrieved from under the spare tire of my truck before the police took the boat in as evidence. It was heavy, not just with paper, but with the weight of the truth. I opened the door to the interrogation room. Rebecca stopped talking mid-sentence. Her eyes landed on the black case in my hand, and for the first time since she started her performance, her face went slack. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking like a wax doll left too long in the sun. I did not say a word. I walked to the table and placed the case in the center. The thud it made against the metal surface sounded like a gavel coming down. I unlatched the clips. Snap, snap. Rebecca stopped breathing. I opened the lid. Inside, nestled in the foam, were the 5 passports: Sarah Jenkins, Emily Thorne, Vanessa Black. I fanned them out on the table like a winning poker hand. "Who are these women, Rebecca?" I asked, my voice calm and steady. "Are they victims of my racism too?" She stared at the passports. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The victim act evaporated. There was no way to explain away 5 federal documents with her face and different names. But I wasn't done. I reached under the foam padding and pulled out the second item I had found. It was a leather-bound notebook worn at the edges. I had only glanced at it in the garage, but I had read enough to know what it was. It was a trophy case. I opened the book to the first marked page. Subject 1, Mark Jenkins. I read aloud. Location, Dayton, Ohio. Substance, arsenic. Duration, 6 months. Notes. He cried too much at the end. Pathetic. I turned the page. Subject 2. David Thorne. Location, Phoenix, Arizona. Substance, digitalis. Duration, 3 months. Notes. Heart gave out faster than expected. Good payout. I looked up at her. Her eyes were black holes of hatred. She wasn't crying anymore. She was vibrating with a silent, lethal rage. And here we are, I said, turning to the last used page. Subject 3, Terence Cross. Substance, ethylene glycol. Notes, strong constitution, taking too long, annoying father, needs to be accelerated. I slammed the book shut. This isn't a diary, I said, my voice rising. It is a ledger. You documented their deaths like you were balancing a checkbook. You wrote down their pain like it was a science experiment. Detective Johnson reached for the book, his face pale. He opened it, scanning the pages. Jesus, he muttered. There are dates, amounts, insurance policy numbers. This is a confession to 3 murders written in your own hand. Rebecca did not speak. She sat perfectly still, staring at the book. The silence stretched out tight as a piano wire. Then she looked at me. There was no fear in her eyes anymore, no plea for mercy, just a cold reptilian calculation. You should have died on that boat, she said. Her voice was devoid of any human inflection. It sounded like a machine. You are nothing but a cockroach, Jeremiah. I stepped on you and you just would not crunch. That was it. The mask was gone. She wasn't denying it anymore. She was annoyed that she had failed. Detective Johnson stood up. We are done here. We have enough to put you away for 3 lifetimes. Wait, I said. There is one more thing. I turned toward the mirror, knowing Terence was watching. I knew he needed one final push. The diary was abstract. The passports were paper. He needed to see the cruelty. He needed to see the hatred. I nodded to the detective, who pulled a laptop from his bag and set it on the table. He connected it to the large monitor on the wall. During my investigation, I installed hidden cameras in your home. I explained to Rebecca, who was now glaring at the wall. I wanted to protect my son, but I saw things I did not expect. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. It was a grainy black and white feed from the living room camera I had hidden in the smoke detector. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. On the screen, Rebecca was sitting on the sofa watching television. Zola walked into the frame. She was holding a drawing, a picture she had made at school. She walked up to her mother, tentatively holding out the paper. Look, Mommy, Zola said, her voice tiny on the recording. I drew us. Rebecca snatched the paper from the child's hand. She did not even look at it. She crumpled it into a ball and threw it in Zola's face. I told you not to bother me when I am watching my show, she hissed. You are a needy little brat just like your father. Go to your room before I give you something to cry about. On the screen, Zola flinched as if she had been struck. She turned and ran, crying. Rebecca watched her go, then laughed. She laughed. I watched the mirror. I couldn't see Terence, but I could feel his heart breaking. He had believed she was a good mother. He had believed she loved Zola. But the next clip was worse. The video switched to the kitchen. It was the morning of the day Terence collapsed. Rebecca was standing at the counter preparing his morning smoothie, the green sludge she claimed was full of vitamins. She poured the juice into a glass. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out the vial of antifreeze. She poured a generous splash into the drink. That was bad enough. But then she did something that made my stomach turn. She cleared her throat with a wet, guttural sound and spat a thick glob of saliva into the glass. She took a spoon and stirred it in, watching it swirl into the green liquid with a look of pure disgust on her face. Drink up, hubby, she whispered to the empty room. Die quickly so I can go shopping. She smiled a cruel, satisfied smirk and walked out of the frame to deliver the poison to my son. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the interrogation room was absolute. Even the detective looked sick. That is how much she loved you, I said, speaking to the mirror, speaking to my son. She didn't just want you dead. She despised you. She spat in your face while you were dying. The door to the interrogation room flew open. It wasn't a police officer. It was Terence. He had wheeled himself out of the observation room, tearing the IV drip from his arm. Blood trickled down his wrist, but he did not feel it. He wheeled his chair right up to the table until his knees were touching the metal. He looked at Rebecca. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman he had defended against me, the woman he had planned to grow old with. She looked back at him defiant. What she said. Are you going to cry, Terence? You always were a crybaby. Terence stared at her for a long time. His face was wet with tears, but his expression was not sad. It was shattered. It was the look of a man who has realized that his entire reality was a hallucination. I loved you, he whispered. I gave you everything I had. I defended you. I almost threw my own father out of the house for you. And that is why you were easy, Rebecca sneered. You were desperate for love, Terrence. You were pathetic. It was so easy to make you feel special. All I had to do was smile and you wagged your tail like a dog. Terrence closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, a shuddering gasp that racked his thin frame. You are not a person, he said, his voice gaining a sudden terrible strength. You are a disease, and I am finally cured. He turned his wheelchair around. Dad, he said, not looking back at her. Get me out of here. I cannot breathe the same air as her. I grabbed the handles of his wheelchair. As I turned him toward the door, Rebecca stood up, slamming her handcuffed fists onto the table. You are nothing without me, she screamed, the veins in her neck bulging. You will die alone, Terrence. You are weak. You need me. Detective Johnson grabbed her, forcing her back into the chair. I pushed Terrence out of the room into the hallway. The heavy steel door slammed shut, cutting off her screams. We stopped in the corridor. The air was cooler here, cleaner. Terrence put his head in his hands and wept. He cried like a child, deep heaving sobs that shook his whole body. He cried for the wife he thought he had. He cried for the years he had wasted. He cried for the betrayal of his daughter. I knelt beside his chair and wrapped my arms around him. I did not say anything. There were no words. I just held him while he broke apart, knowing that this was the only way he could ever be put back together. I am sorry, Dad, he choked out between sobs. I am so sorry. I know, son, I whispered, stroking his hair. I know. It is over now. She can never hurt us again. But I knew the road ahead was long. The poison was out of his body, but the toxins she had planted in his mind, the doubt, the self-loathing, the trauma, those would take much longer to purge. We had opened Pandora's box and the monsters were out, but at least now we could see them, and we could fight them together. The courtroom was a theater of the absurd, and Rebecca was the star of the show. She sat at the defense table, huddled inside a gray cardigan 3 sizes too big for her. Her hair was unwashed, hanging in limp, greasy strands around a face that was completely devoid of makeup. She looked fragile. She looked broken. She looked like a child who had been lost in the woods for days. It was a masterclass in manipulation, and I hated her for it. Her lawyer was a man named Klein, a court-appointed shark who smelled blood in the water. He was pacing in front of the jury box, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, gesturing to the shivering woman behind him. You have heard the prosecution describe a monster. They have shown you diaries and passports. They have played recordings. But I ask you to look at this woman. Look at her. Does she look like a mastermind? Does she look like a cold-blooded killer? He paused for effect, letting the silence stretch. We are not denying that she wrote those things in the diary, Klein continued. We are not denying that she bought the passports. But these are not the actions of a criminal. They are the symptoms of a severe paranoid schizophrenic break. My client has been suffering in silence for years. She hears voices. She believes she is being persecuted. That diary is not a confession. It is a work of fiction created by a diseased mind trying to make sense of a terrifying world. She did not kill her previous husbands. They died of natural causes, and her illness made her believe she was responsible. She needs a hospital, not a prison. She needs help, not a death sentence. I watched Rebecca from the gallery. She was trembling slightly. She was rocking back and forth, murmuring to herself. The jury was watching her too, and I could see the pity in their eyes. They saw a sick white woman being persecuted by the system. They saw a victim. But I saw the truth. I saw the way her finger tapped against her leg underneath the table. It was a steady, rhythmic tap, 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 tap. It was the same rhythm she used to tap on the steering wheel when she was impatient in traffic. She wasn't having a psychotic break. She was bored. She was calculating the odds. She was waiting for her turn to speak so she could spin the narrative again. Beside me, Terrence gripped the wooden bench until his knuckles turned white. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. He wanted to scream. He wanted to stand up and tell them about the way she smiled when she poured the poison. But he couldn't. He had to trust the process. The prosecution rested, and it was time for the defense to call their witnesses. Klein called me to the stand. It was a bold move. He wanted to discredit me. He wanted to paint me as the angry, senile father-in-law who had driven this poor woman to the brink of insanity. I walked to the witness stand, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. I sat down and placed my hands on my knees. Mr. Cross Klein began, his voice dripping with condescension. Let us be honest with the jury. You never liked Rebecca, did you? I did not trust her, I corrected him. Klein smiled. You did not trust her. You thought she was not good enough for your son. You thought she was an outsider. You are a retired mechanic, is that correct? You fix lawnmowers in your garage for cash. I fix engines, I said. Right, Klein said, waving a hand dismissively. You are a blue-collar man, a simple man. And here comes this successful, beautiful real estate agent who marries your son. She has money, she has class, she has a future. And you live in their basement. You rely on them for housing. You rely on them for food. It must have been humiliating for you. I said nothing. I let him dig his hole. You created a fantasy, Klein shouted, pointing a finger at me. You invented a conspiracy to bring her down. You planted that diary. You planted the poison. You hired a private investigator with money you do not have. Tell the court, Mr. Cross. How does a mechanic afford a high-priced investigator? How does a mechanic afford to rig a boat with military-grade surveillance equipment? You are the one who is mentally unstable, sir. You are the one who is obsessed. He stopped panting slightly. He looked at the jury, expecting to see them nodding in agreement. He thought he had me. He thought I was just a poor old black man who had overstepped his bounds. Are you finished? I asked, my voice calm. Klein blinked. Answer the question. How did you pay for it? I leaned forward toward the microphone. I am not just a mechanic. Mr. Klein, I said. My name is on 12 different patents for chemical extraction processes that are currently used by Exxon, Chevron, and BP. I retired from the petrochemical industry 15 years ago as a senior lead engineer. I fix lawnmowers because I like working with my hands, not because I need the money. The courtroom went silent. Klein froze. Rebecca stopped rocking. Her head snapped up, and for the first time she looked at me with genuine shock. I have $8 million in liquid assets sitting in a trust fund. I continued, my voice ringing out in the quiet room. I have another $5 million in real estate holdings. I did not tell my son because I wanted him to build his own character. I wanted him to know the value of a dollar. I looked at the jury. They were staring at me with wide eyes. The narrative of the jealous poor father-in-law had just evaporated. I did not need to plant evidence, I said. I did not need to invent a conspiracy. I used my resources to uncover the truth because the police would not listen to a black man in coveralls. I hired the best investigators money could buy. I bought the equipment to save my son's life. I turned my gaze to Rebecca. I did not buy justice, I said. I bought the shovel to dig up the truth. And what I found was a serial killer who murdered 3 men for insurance money and was about to murder a 4th. Klein tried to object. He stammered something about relevance, but the judge overruled him. The damage was done. I wasn't the villain. I was the hero who had been hiding in plain sight. I looked at Rebecca. Her act was gone. The fragility had vanished. She was staring at me with a hatred so pure it felt like heat on my skin. She knew. She knew she had lost. She had underestimated me because of my race, because of my age, and because of my clothes, and that underestimation had been her fatal error. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. It was the longest 4 hours of my life. Terrence and I sat in the hallway drinking terrible court coffee, saying nothing. We didn't need to speak. We just needed it to be over. When the bailiff called us back, the air in the courtroom was electric. Rebecca stood up as the jury foreman read the verdict. She was still wearing the oversized cardigan, but she wasn't hunched over anymore. She was standing straight, bracing herself. In the matter of the People versus Vanessa Thorne, also known as Rebecca Cross, on the charge of first-degree murder of Mark Jenkins, we find the defendant guilty. Rebecca flinched as if she had been slapped. On the charge of first-degree murder of David Thorne, guilty. On the charge of attempted murder of Terrence Cross, guilty. On the charge of attempted murder of Jeremiah Cross, guilty. 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 The word echoed like a hammer blow. The judge looked at Rebecca over his spectacles. His face was grim. Vanessa Thorne, you have preyed on the trust and love of good men for a decade. You have treated human life as a commodity. You have shown no remorse. You have shown no humanity. He banged his gavel. I sentence you to 3 consecutive life terms in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. You will die in prison. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. The gallery buzzed. But over the noise, a scream cut through the air. It was a sound of pure animal rage. Rebecca lunged. She didn't lunge at the judge. She lunged at me. You ruined me, she screamed, her face twisted into a demonic mask. You dirty old bastard. You should be dead. I killed you. I killed you in my head 1,000 times. Two bailiffs grabbed her, hauling her back. She fought them, kicking and spitting. "I am smarter than you," she shrieked, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth. "I am better than you. You are nothing. You are dirt." They dragged her toward the side door. She dug her heels into the carpet, fighting every inch of the way. She looked at Terrence, who was watching her with tears streaming down his face. "You are pathetic, Terrence," she screamed. "You never made me happy. You were boring. You were weak. I hated every second I spent with you." The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off her voice. The silence that followed was heavy and profound. It was the silence of a storm that has finally passed, leaving wreckage in its wake. I looked at Terrence. He was shaking. He looked like he might collapse. I stood up and walked over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder. "It is done, son," I said softly. "She is gone." He looked up at me. His eyes were red, but they were clear. The fog was lifting. "She hated me, Dad," he whispered. "No, son," I said. "She hated herself. She just used you to try and fill the hole where her soul used to be." We walked out of the courtroom together. The cameras flashed, the reporters shouted, but we didn't stop. We walked down the steps into the bright afternoon sun. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. It tasted like freedom. I looked at my son. He was broken. He was scarred, but he was alive. And as long as he was alive, we could rebuild. We had walked through the fire and we had come out the other side. Now it was time to go home. 6 months have passed since the gavel fell and the heavy steel doors of the federal penitentiary closed behind the woman I once called my daughter-in-law. The silence in our house is different now. It is no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets and terror. It is the quiet stillness of healing, like a forest slowly growing back after a devastating fire. But recovery is not a straight line, and watching my son navigate the wreckage of his life has been the hardest task of my retirement. Terrence is alive, but he is a shadow of the man he was before she found him. The poison is gone from his blood, but the damage to his kidneys is permanent. He spends 3 days a week at the dialysis center hooked up to machines that clean his blood because his own body can no longer do the job. He lost 30 pounds that he has not been able to put back on, and his skin still carries a gray pallor that reminds me every day of how close I came to burying him. But the physical scars are nothing compared to the invisible ones. For the first 3 months, Terrence barely spoke. He moved through the house like a ghost, flinching at loud noises and staring at the walls where her pictures used to hang. We took them all down. We burned them in the backyard fire pit, watching her smile curl into ash, but her memory still haunts him. He struggles with a crushing guilt that keeps him awake at night. He blames himself for letting a monster into our home. He blames himself for endangering Zola. He sits in therapy sessions twice a week trying to untangle the web of manipulation she spun around his mind. Last week I found him in the garage staring at his old tools. He picked up a wrench, his hand trembling slightly. I walked over and placed my hand on his shoulder. We did not say a word. We just stood there, two broken men in a garage full of memories. Then slowly he started to turn a bolt. It was a small thing, but it was a start. He is working with me now in the shop, helping me fix the engines I used to tinker with alone. He is learning that he is not defined by the woman who tried to kill him. He is defined by the fact that he survived her. It is a slow, painful climb out of the abyss, but for the first time in years I see a flicker of my son in his eyes. The laughter of a child is the most powerful medicine in the world. And hearing Zola laugh again was the moment I knew we were going to be okay. For weeks after the arrest, she was terrified of the dark, terrified of sudden movements, terrified that her mother would come back. She slept in my room on a cot, refusing to be alone. But children are resilient in ways that adults are not. We spent hours in the garden planting vegetables and flowers, reclaiming the yard that Rebecca had turned into a manicured showpiece where no one was allowed to play. Now it is messy and full of life, just like a home should be. But the biggest victory was the boat. The 20-foot bow rider that had been the stage for our near execution sat in the police impound for 4 months. When they released it back to us, Terrence wanted to sell it. He wanted to burn it. He could not look at it without shaking, but I told him no. If we sell it, she wins. If we destroy it, the fear remains. We have to take it back. We spent a month scrubbing every inch of that hull. I removed the cameras, the microphones, and the kill switch I had installed. We repainted the trim. We replaced the seat covers. We turned it from a crime scene back into a vessel. Last Sunday, the sun was high and bright, the water of the lake sparkling like diamonds. We took the boat out not to the middle of the lake where the water is deep and dark, but to the shallow coves where the fish jump. Zola sat in the captain's chair, her small hands gripping the wheel. She was wearing a new life jacket, bright orange and safe. She looked at me, her eyes shining with excitement, not fear. "Can I go fast, Grandpa?" she asked. I looked at Terrence sitting in the back. He was tense, his knuckles white as he gripped the rail. I nodded at him. He took a deep breath and nodded back. "Go fast, Zola," I said. She pushed the throttle and the boat leaped forward, cutting through the water. The wind whipped her hair back and she squealed with delight. I watched my son close his eyes and let the spray hit his face, washing away the memories of that terrible day. We were not victims running from a killer anymore. We were a family enjoying a Sunday afternoon. We had reclaimed the water. Tonight I sit on the end of the dock, my legs dangling over the edge, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The house behind me is lit up warm and inviting. I can see Terrence and Zola inside cooking dinner together. They are making a mess, and it is beautiful. I pull my phone from my pocket and open my banking app. The balance is a string of numbers that would make most people dizzy. $8 million. Money I earned designing systems to refine the black blood of the earth. Money Rebecca would have killed for. I tap the screen and initiate a transfer. $1 million. It is a lot of money, but I have plenty left. The recipient is a new foundation I established last week. The Vanessa Thorne Victims Fund. It is dedicated to helping the families of the men she killed, providing legal aid to victims of domestic financial abuse, and supporting children left behind by black widows. It is justice paid for with the very greed that drove her. I put the phone away and lean back on my hands. The air smells of pine and water. I think about the man I was 6 months ago, the quiet mechanic who hid his wealth to teach a lesson. I learned a lesson too. I learned that silence is not always a virtue. I learned that sometimes you have to show your teeth to protect your pack. People say blood is thicker than water and that family is everything. They are right. But sometimes to protect that blood, you have to be willing to spill it. Sometimes to save your family, you have to become the monster is afraid of. I am Jeremiah Cross. I am 69 years old. I am a millionaire. I am an engineer. But above all else, I am a father. And God help anyone who tries to hurt my children again. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you would have forgiven your son or if you think I did the right thing. Until next time, protect your family and watch your back. This harrowing journey teaches us that the greatest danger to our families often hides behind a smile. Jeremiah believed that withholding his wealth would build his son's character, but he learned that true protection sometimes requires revealing our full strength. We cannot be passive observers when our instincts scream that something is wrong. The story reminds us that while we cannot always prevent evil from entering our lives, we have the power to confront it. It is a testament that age is not a weakness, and a father's love is the most formidable weapon against any darkness threatening his home. If you believe Jeremiah did the right thing, hit the like button, subscribe for more riveting stories, and tell us in the comments, would you have revealed your secret sooner?